I want to thank you to the U.S. Commerce Department and the U.S. Patent Trade Office team, and especially Nathanya, Deepak, and Sean for this opportunity. I also want to thank Operation Hope and our family, especially our founder, chairman, and CEO, John Hope Bryant, for creating our unique civil rights movement around financial inclusion for all. Operation Hope is partnered with the U.S. Commerce Department and the U.S. Patent and Trade Office in support of entrepreneurship and innovation. We are in our 30th year. We're celebrating that around financial inclusive work. And this discussion is especially important because we enjoy working with our federal partners around initiatives that fund to fuel future innovation. During the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, Chairman Bryant announced our 10-year commitment with Shopify to assist 1 million African American businesses to start, rebuild, and or refocus its small businesses. It's called our 1 Million Black Business Initiative. For example, in Texas, we've worked with the REACH Project to assist African American businesses. And in a short amount of time, in less than a year, 30 businesses were created in the Bryan Station community. We're happy to partner again with Commerce and the Patent Trade Office around 1MBB and to share the educational U.S. Patent and Trade Office resources and services. You can go to our website at www.operationhope.org to learn more about our work and the work that we do with our federal partners, including Commerce and U.S. Patent Trade Office. So today we have 3 great American innovators to discuss funds to fill your future. They will share with you their background, tell you a little bit about their own innovation. So let's get right into it. Kidma, why don't we start with you? And thank you for being here.
Oh, it's such an honor. Thank you. So just briefly, a little bit about my background. I'm a 5th generation entrepreneur. Most people are 1st or 2nd. So I like to say when you're a 5th generation, you're negotiating as soon as you're born. And so I have been in the innovation space close to 20 years. My claim to fame is one of 2 things. The first is I brought the SBIR STTR program to Oregon and changed the landscape. And I primarily did that because when I did an analysis, I realized that the majority of funds coming into our state were not going to women, were not going to minorities. And frankly, I was mad. So I said, we have to change the landscape. And that's why I love what you just said. How do we bring more diversity into the innovation and funding space? And my second claim to fame is I wrote a best-selling book around target funding. How do we target the money we need? And I'll share more about that later, but it took 15 years. 15 years to research, 3 years to write the book, and over 300 resources. So I really believe that there is a place for everyone to win, but it's just understanding how do we navigate where we want to go. Thank you for having me.
We see your book in the background.
Yes. My book is in the background. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks for being an author. Carolyn Rods, over to you.
All right. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Carolyn Rods. I'm the co-founder at Hello Alice. We are a platform that supports over 1 million small business owners to connect them to early stage sources of capital, everything from grant funding to getting their first credit card for their business to getting a loan, a fair and equitable loan, but really focus on ultimately helping build financially healthy businesses that can grow and thrive, and primarily supporting what we call the new majority, but the fastest growing segments of entrepreneurs, which you all have all been talking about today, but women, people of color, the veteran community, the LGBTQ plus community, immigrant populations, people with disabilities. We are out scouring the entire ecosystem, including many great things from the USPTO, but making sure that all of those great resources are connected and aggregated in one place so that everybody has when they need and it's delivered when they need it based on their personal profile and their business profile. In terms of my own journey, this is actually my 3rd company. I left investment banking to start my first business, which is my failed entrepreneurial experience. So happy to dive more into that if anyone's interested. Started a second company in the digital media space, which I ultimately sold. And it was really those 2 experiences that led to the genesis of Hello Alice. But the idea that the same entrepreneur can have very different experiences based on access to capital and knowledge and opportunities along the journey. So I look forward to chatting with everyone today.
Thank you so much. Tricia Campos-Markman, over to you to talk about VentureWell.
All right. Thanks, Janae. And good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm in Oakland, California. So it's morning for me, but happy to be here with everybody. I'm a senior program officer at VentureWell, based on the East Coast, and we support a number of innovators, and our ecosystem player to help with innovation. And my role is to really work with early stage innovators, all the way from student innovators to early stage entrepreneurs, helping them with the commercialization aspects of really pushing on the business side, right? Is there a market application? Who are your customers versus your end user? And then investment readiness. So it's really exciting to be here. My connection to VentureWell was that I was an early stage entrepreneur about 13 years ago. My background's in civil and environmental engineering, went to Cal Poly and San Luis Obispo, and was a co-inventor of a water treatment technology. A little bit risk adverse to diving into starting a business, but had some really great advisors and a support system that really encouraged me, including VentureWell, and started my own business. We had a global impact, worked in over 35 countries, raised both non-dilutive and equity financing, worked with the board of directors. So, coming from the engineering side, all of a sudden realizing this is way more than about innovation. It's about understanding the customer, understanding the partners. And so it's really exciting to be here and provide kind of the entrepreneur lens, as well as, with the fellow panelists, to share about that and the funding journey and the ups and downs of entrepreneurship. So thank you for having me.
Well, this is going to be really exciting. We've got 7 questions already in the queue that we're going to jump right into. Feel free to respond accordingly. There seems to be so many funding options between angel, investor, accelerators, incubators, grants, yada, yada, yada. How do I know which one is the right fit for my business? Why don't we start with you, Carolyn? And I'm a big fan of Hello Alice and the work that you
Thank you. Well, I can speak both from personal experience in terms of it is overwhelming trying to figure out which type of funding is right for you. And I have taken funding from a lot of those sources. I think the most important thing early on is to figure out what your long-term goals are. Are you on a high growth trajectory? Are you looking to build a business that's going to be sustainable for you and for your family? What's your risk tolerance? Are you looking to take on debt or equity? And what that really means. And so there are a host of resources. We actually have quite a few guides on Hello Alice that walk you through what are the right sources of funding for you. So based on the type of company that you are, where should you end up? I think that it's sort of a crawl, walk, run strategy in terms of starting small and getting some traction in proof of product market fit. So many times we see founders jump straight into trying to get venture capital when the reality is, I think in our first years for the business, we funded through partnerships. We took on a lot of consulting agreements just to get some cash in the door. It was non-dilutive capital, helped us fund and get to the next stage. We did get grants. I know, Kedma, you mentioned SBIR. We participated in the Growth Accelerator Fund through the SBA, some grants through the Kauffman Foundation that helped us through. It was really just sort of patching things together to help us get put one foot in front of the other and get more and more and more traction. At that point, we took on some loans, both, some that I would recommend, some that I wouldn't, but we did what we needed to sort of get through to the next stage. Until you have some traction, some proof, and some evidence that you are on a high growth trajectory, wouldn't waste your time on venture capital. It takes very time consuming. You're giving up a lot of equity for your company. And so the later that you can push that back in the funnel, the better for your business. But happy to chat in detail. I know there's a lot to unpack there, but I would say really thinking about how can you get non-dilutive, more sustainable capital, and really think about the revenue dollars. If you can focus on that piece first as much as you can, and what do you need to actually bring revenue in the door, even if it's a small amount, what do you need to get to that phase before you start looking at, how do you build the $1 million or $5 million or $100 million business?
Thank you for that, Kedma.
Yes, I am going to piggyback exactly to what Carolyn said. It is exhausting and it's difficult to navigate. So a few things I want to share. One is I truly believe that there is a funding party having every day of the week. There's a funding party. But the problem is most people don't know where the party is. And you have to choose which party you want to be part of, which is where I always look at what are the variables? Where do you want to go? So let's get really quickly deep and then I'll move on. So as a fun exercise, right before I jumped on, I said, let me do a little funding review for the audience. So if you're in fashion manufacturing, there is a funding grant set aside in New York City. But you have to know, okay, am I based in the state? And am I looking at fashion manufacturing? I love the IDA program, the match savings program that is across the country. But again, it's very niched and you have to figure out if you want to fit in. Prosper Oregon, unbelievable. They put together $100,000 for the cannabis industry. So you're thinking, what? How could this be economic development in cannabis? But it was only for African Americans who were opening up in Portland who happen to be in the cannabis industry. Notice how everything is very targeted. Disability. I have 2 out of 3 of my kids who are autistic. I know this space inside and out, and there is so much fun, whether you're a service disabled vet, whether you have a visual impairment, whether you are part of Voc Rehab. And then there was a mention on looking at investment. I'm an accredited investor, and I will tell you, investors look at specific thesis. Not all investors are going to like what you're offering. So I'm part of what we call TBD Angel, and then I do my own investment opportunities for early stage. If I like it, sounds interesting, then we work together. And then lastly, we talk about licensing, right? Sometimes we don't need a loan. Sometimes we don't even need a grant. Sometimes we just need the right connections so someone can hear what we have to say and say, you know what? I'd like to do a licensing deal with you. All to say this, it's not about finding the money. There's tons of money and resources. It's not about finding it. It's about winning it. So I can show you 100 funds. So what? It's about winning that money and thinking about what makes sense right now for where I am and what's the best way to target it. So hopefully I unpacked a little to answer that question.
It was a great segment, I think, for Tricia, because we're all big fans of Venture Well. Over to you.
Okay, great. No, thanks. There's a lot of things that are resonating with me from Carolyn and Kedma. And I think maybe one thing that in our early stage programming at VentureWell, when we, for the very, very early stage student innovators, we run a funding session and we ask the first question, what's the most important type of funding that you can get for your venture? And we get different answers, but it's revenue. Yeah, okay, that right? You got customers paying you're showing that the demand and the need is there and the impact. But to step back, that's really hard. I think Carolyn made that point. That's really hard to do right off the bat. And we work with a lot of innovators that have a long, technical path to move through, typically hardware technology. So they need some funding. So I think both what, Carolyn said about finding those non-dilutive sources and doing it in a phased approach. Think about, okay, maybe I need $1 million, but what would 25,000 or 50,000 get me? And would I be able to hit those milestones that I need to? So think through kind of the foundation, the roadmap of what you're doing. Do you have that right product market fit? And then what do I need to do to achieve and get to the next step? So we really encourage our teams, and we see the teams we work with at VentureWell getting non-dilutive funding. And again, we work on the early side with students. So going to your universities, if you still are a student, go to business plan competitions, innovation plan competitions, possibly stipends or scholarships that may be available. Go to your alumni networks, see if there's some connections there. And then also nationwide, there's to Kedma's point, there's a lot of opportunities out there, but seeing what's the right fit. Do you have a connection into it? And is it going to help you stay the course with your business model and ultimately get you to your customer? So not kind of, not off to the side, but is this really going to help us do X, Y, Z to get there? So it's hard. It's a slog. Don't give up. Get people around you to help vet, get your financials set up, get some tests so that when you're ready to go after. And for those teams that are maybe a little bit further along looking at angel or VC funding, I think Carolyn, you made the point again, like can you push it off? Is there another alternate source? But there can be a good relationship with those equity investors. And I think for me is when I started to understand, kind of break through the barrier that these are partners and they come with more than just funding. They come with introductions, help us with different customers. That's when I started to really open up to that and maybe not be so closed off to it. But go after the non-dilutive funding, try to get the customer revenue, prove your milestones. Reach out to VentureWell. We have a lot of early stage programming, non-dilutive grant opportunities for student innovators and early stage entrepreneurs, from climate tech to med tech and everything in between.
We have just a quick piggyback off of that. We actually have our small business growth fund launching, which is open to everybody. You'll talked a lot about grant funding, but it opens up for everybody later this month.
Why don't you give people your website so that they can hear a little bit more about what you just said?
Yeah, if you go to helloalice.com, and if you're registered there, it's free, it doesn't cost anything, but we'll send targeted, to Kedma's point, what is relevant to you based on you and your business every week, so we can help track a lot of those resources for you and find what's targeted, because it is very segmented, to your point, Kedma, by audience.
We're going to stick with you, Carolyn, for the next question. We're dealing with the Patent and Trade Office. We all love working with them. A lot of people not so sure sometimes around, how do I exactly engage with the educational resources and services that are provided there? Is a patent and trademark necessary when you're starting a business, when you're looking for funding for a product, and for, your initiative?
I would say, it varies significantly based on the type of business. And one of the things when we first went out to raise capital, we got asked a lot about what are the barriers to entry for your market. We were starting a platform for small business owners. The idea was, okay, this is great. We love what you're doing. What happens when a competitor comes around and tries to emulate what you're building? We had really strong barriers to entry sort of built into the model. And so it made sense. People bought it. It has played out as we suspected. However, I think in a different business model where you may not have those, a patent, it does provide that barrier to entry and that competitive sort of, boundary, I guess, in the market. And so it definitely depends. It is costly and time consuming. I think thanks to the great resources that USPTO has put out there, certainly less and less so, which is great. And so it is 100% worth pursuing if that is your competitive differentiator. So definitely recommend, I think, meeting with them. I know they're always really open to meetings and having conversations. There's a ton of great resources on the USPTO website. We also share guides around getting patents and trademarks, and worth also having a conversation with, an IP attorney, potentially to kind of talk through your options and understand. And then organizations like VentureWell as well. They always have great mentors and experts and things to provide on thinking through more specific circumstances related to your business.
Well, Kedma, this is a great segue for you. You're a fifth generation family oriented serial entrepreneur. So I'm sure the question around patent and trademarks for all the family oriented business venture innovators out there listening, what advice do you have about the patent and trademark and building a relationship not only with the agency, but securing your fifth generational business?
Well, a few things. I absolutely love the hard work the U.S. Patent Office is doing, and I love the pro bono legal program. I absolutely love it because it works. However, even in that perspective, what we've noticed is you still have to present something that's going to be attractive enough for the pro bono legal attorney to say yes. So even there, if I'm working with someone to apply, we sit down, we think about, okay, how do we make this so enticing, this application, that attorney is going to be like, absolutely, we definitely want to work with you and support this legal aspect. Two, the thing we have to remember is there was a mention on barrier to entry. Carolyn mentioned barrier to entry. I think having a trademark or having a patent is another tool in your toolbox. However, just remember, and we all know this, that just because you have it doesn't mean it's not going to be challenged. So you have to be thinking about, can I defend it? And if I can't defend it, can I align with a university like an STTR program or a licensing opportunity with a manufacturer so that they can defend it? So I would say at the end of the day, it's more about where to put your first amount of money in and decide, does this make sense? I'm going to give another resource, and there's plenty out there, but I happen to love Patent Search International's patent research program. I send my own mother through it because for $250, I can have a full patent search done by a former patent agent and an attorney review it. And I'm going to get the report in 7 to 10 days and tell me exactly if it's patentable. And then we start moving forward. So in the case of my mom, she's a nurse. She had this great idea. I put her through the program. $250 later, the attorney said, unfortunately, this is already being protected, even if it's not in the market. She's still mad at me. 10 years later, she's still mad. Well, you just ruined my idea. I didn't ruin your idea. We just confirmed that if you did it, you could be infringing, right? The point is it only costs $250 to find that, and then I could pivot. So that would be what I would be thinking about is, what are we trying to seek first? And I always look at the money first before I consider moving through the idea.
Kedma, your mom sounds like my mom. I could totally hear her saying that.
And so for some newcomers who are not used to the logo of USPTO, we're talking about the United States Patent and Trademark Office. So we are getting close to the half hour mark here. And let's get to question number 4. Sort of dovetails into this. And Tricia, why don't you start the question? And if you have any comments around the Patent and Trademark Office, add it in there as well. What are some of the biggest reasons people are not successful in securing funding?
I think we hit on some of it in just the how hard it is. Where do I align? Can I find it? But I think if we step back, looking at whether it's a non-dilutive source or an equity investor, as a inventor or as an entrepreneur, you don't want to have a technology that's trying to find a problem. You really want to understand that problem. And do you understand, who the paying customer is versus maybe it may be different than the end user. So really kind of getting that foundation. And then we run an investment readiness program at VentureWell called Aspire, and we bring in active investors at the angel, VC, and corporate side. And we talk about what are the things that they're looking for. And they say TMT, team market technology. And I think this is also valid for non-dilutive funding organizations as well. But the market could change. That's the M of the TMT. The technology could change. If you do have to pivot, to Kedma's point, may have to pivot, may have to look. But your team is really, really critical. Now, your team also could change, but is your team? Do you have the right strengths? Are people filling different gaps? Are they, really, really going to, work the day in and days out of an early stage startup to weather the storms that are really challenging? And so I think having a strong team, people want to work with good people. So investors really want to say, this is a team I can get behind. I really think that they can do it. And they can, if you do have to do a pivot. So I think making sure you have that product market fit and making sure that you have a team, foundational team. And being a early stage entrepreneur, it's hard to find a team that fits. So it's easy for me to say that. But I think being able to have your network, talk to advisors, talk to people about what you're doing, try to build an advisory team, a support system, and try to find, hey, I'm really strong on the technical side, but I think I'm going to need a salesperson over here to help me understand the market more and work through that. So don't give up with the funding side. Have your plan, but really try to have a team behind it to help you because it can be a little bit lonely, entrepreneurship, but it's really exciting too. And then maybe just a quick note on the IP side. We find that being really crucial in intellectual property, whether that's patents, trademarks, trade secrets, so crucial for early stage innovators because it may be the only asset that they have right now and what kind of value are they providing. But it can be challenging. So try to, phase it out, but look at how you can be strategic with what you're doing, and is it novel enough that the market is also, wanting it as well. But yeah, funding is hard.
Carolyn, we'll pivot back to you. Before we get to you, I just want to say on behalf of Operation Hope, Chairman Bryan 30 years ago created our Small Business and Entrepreneurship Program, where we provide the kind of technical assistance that small businesses and startups need. And in our entrepreneurship courses, we work with the Patent and Trade Office and share information on how to file for your patent and your trademark. It's an integral part of our portfolio because we want small businesses and entrepreneurs and startups to know in that process of when they're looking to grow their business or start their business, these different nonprofits and for-profit and programs out there that are helping to provide entrepreneurship and innovation education. It's so critical that aspect of it is out there. But again, the question always comes back to, I don't have any money. So Carolyn, what do you say to that? That's really one of the biggest reasons people struggle with getting their idea and their innovation off the ground.
Yeah, it's a chicken or egg dilemma, right? I mean, it's the number one barrier that entrepreneurs cite across the board. We've been tracking this, what is the greatest challenge for your business since we started Hello Alice 5 years ago. 100% of the time, it has been lack of funding. But the reality is what entrepreneurs really want is more money in their pockets. And that means either they need to grow their core revenues, which is the most sustainable and enduring solution, as Tricia touched on earlier. But lots of times to an entrepreneur, that means, look, I actually need funding to get to that next level. And they have to work in tandem. And there's been times, in our first round of funding, we went out to the venture community to raise several $1 million. We ended up cutting the funding round short for our seed round, just saying, look, we actually, if we were to take this time and go apply it to growing revenues, we could grow it faster. So let's pause. We've got enough in the bank that we can bridge ourselves through, and let's go focus on the core business. And I think what entrepreneurs often fail to realize is that fundraising is incredibly time consuming. Mm-hmm. It is, you're starting, instead of working in the here and now, you've got to create the case for the 2, 3, 5 year, timeline, which takes a lot of time and energy. And it's a helpful experience because it forces you to focus on the big picture, but it also pulls you away from the day to day. And that day to day is critical when you're a team of 3 or 5 or 10 people in the early days. So, I think the advice that I always give people is there are a few things that you have to do all the time for your business. One is understand your finances at every stage. And whether that's to run your core business or whether that's to go seek capital, you need it either way. So you better know the fundamentals and keep your books as clean as possible from the start, because it only gets more complicated as you grow. And if you set up good systems in the early days, you're going to be very, very grateful, either when it comes time to raise capital or when you're just managing the day-to-day. The other piece is focus on the fundamentals of your business. So have 2 or 3 metrics that you're tracking that are your indicators of success. It might be new customer acquisition. It might be your conversion rates. What are the key indicators that help determine how you're going to start funding going forward for your business and where that revenue is going to be coming from? And one of the biggest obstacles and hurdles for a business in the early days is figuring out what those fundamentals are. If you're a retail store, it might be people walking through that front door. If you're a tech company, it might be the number of visitors to your website, and then you're starting to sort of whittle and refine that funnel as you get people towards a purchase. But cracking the code on engagement and repeat business and making sure that you're creating a great core experience. And then your job is to expand that core experience to as many people as possible. But ultimately, you've got to understand the numbers and the metrics behind your business. And I think that'll open up the opportunity for you to either grow your revenues or go seek that funding that you need.
So Kidma, over to you. 5th generation.
My goodness, there's so much to unpack here.
I know you've got 5 generation of thoughts here.
Of thoughts. Okay, first thing I want to call out. When someone says, I don't have any money, we have to look deeper. I've done this over and over again where I ask someone, and they say, I don't have money. I say, tell me what that means. And you know what they say? They say, well, I've had to tell my housekeeper to come only twice a month, not every week. I'm not kidding. Then I say to someone else, I don't have money. I say, tell me what that means. He says, you know what? I have to give blood plasma every week to have enough to make it. So I got to be really careful and not judge that statement. I need to unpack. Second, if someone had no money, forget about the currency. Get to karma dollars. If I had a choice between $100,000 or 100 people in the room that made $1 million each, I'm choosing the other people in the room. Start working on your karma currency. Who are you giving back to? Who are you connecting to? What do your relationships look like? Because that's how you get to where you want to go. The third thing I want to talk about is there's a lot of conversation on non-dilutive funding. 2008, I received an incredible opportunity, purchased my own office, valued at about $900,000 right now, but this is what matters. We're going to talk about this later. I had filed bankruptcy. I had no collateral. I was not creditworthy. And yet, how did I get this opportunity? This opportunity not only allowed me in, instead of paying 20% down, I paid 6% down, and my interest since 2008 has been fixed at 0.04%. That's less than 0.5%. You're not going to get that anywhere. But that came from the karma dollars. You could only get it if you're a woman, minority, or immigrant. You had to be 3 years in business and you'd be serving the community. That's how we got it. So what I want to share is three things you want to think about to be successful. Number one, like everyone said, your team is critical, but who is navigating it? If you don't have a navigator, it's going to be really hard. Two, time is expensive. If you spend hours and hours and hours trying to find this fund and this fund and this fund, and you get doors closed, that's expensive. So you have to think about how much time do I have and what is it worth? And three, I think it's really critical to look at feasibility. Is it feasible? Is it feasible for funding? Is it feasible for marketing? Is it feasible from technology? Is it feasible from time? And the reason I want to bring this up is so many amazing inventors build out their concept and never go to market. Nobody wins. So those would be the three things I would have them walk away and think about and get their story right. There are thousands of people that have amazing, amazing ideas, and you're competing with them. If you can't pitch, you don't have a good story, it's going to be really hard for people to want to work with you, especially from the investor perspective.
Well, let's stick with that question. And by the way, hashtag karma currency. That's really great. You had a journey having to go through bankruptcy, but you became a best-selling author.
Mm-hmm.
How did you fund your business in that?
Man,
We know hashtag karma currency is one of them, but expound on that.
you know, I it's a really tough conversation every time I say it, but what I would tell you is most women who have filed bankruptcy in the US, it's not because they're not financially prudent. Most of the time, they're in a very difficult situation. And often it's because they have to leave a relationship. And that's what I found myself in. I was in a very difficult relationship 6 months prior. I did the honorable thing. We were arguing about money. And I decided one day, I came home and I said, I can't take it anymore. And I took all his bills, all his debt, every invoice he had, and I put it in my name. So there I was 6 months later talking to an attorney, and he gave me two options. He's like, behind door number one, you get to spend the rest of your life paying off someone else's debt. I'm like, is there a door number two? Yep. Behind door number two, you get to file bankruptcy and rebuild your life for 7 to 10 years. I chose door number two. When I filed bankruptcy, I was sitting on the corner on a curb, crying my eyes out, Tucson, Arizona. I thought, God, why are you putting me through this again? And I will tell you right now, it was the best gift I was ever given because I am a successful product from what I designed. How did I figure it out? When I went back to my apartment 2 weeks later, I received a credit card from Capital One for $200. And I remember that moment. I opened it up and I thought, wait a minute. I just filed bankruptcy. Well, why is someone giving me $200? But here's the beauty of it. When I was a little girl, I would play a game called Monopoly. Now, if you've ever played Monopoly, you know you could be totally broke, Everything is mortgage. But if you can roll the dice and pass go, the banker is required to give you $200. That was the moment I said, you know what? I just got played back in the game. Then I said, what if I go on a journey to uncover every fund and every resource and every opportunity for people like me, good people who had a bad situation happen? And that's how I figured it out. I spent 15 years trying to understand where the money is. I've taught at 3 universities. I would say to every student, if you find me a grant I don't know about, I'll take you out to dinner. I had a lot of lonely dinners. And after 15 years, I helped more than 10,000 businesses reshape and find money and leverage over $100 million. So how did I do it? I did exactly the way Carolyn did it. I figured out where are the grants, where are the subsidies, where are the funds, where is the karma? And I did it through the variables. And you know what? It's one of the greatest blessings I received was to go through bankruptcy, because I can now help so many people. Because I was there. I was a credit score 420, and today my credit score is 820.
That's something Operation Hope is big about. We have a 700 credit score initiative, and we work every day. Shout out to the Operation Hope financial well-being coaches who do that. It makes all the difference in the world. And, you know, shout out to Capital One, who gave you a chance to research. Maybe there'll be some other financial institution and fintech companies that'll pick up the ball there. Tricia, over to you. What are some of the funding challenges when you started your company?
Yeah, it was different phases, different challenges, but maybe what I would reflect on, again, because at VentureWell we work with early stage innovators on the student side. So for me, I was a graduate student developing the technology. We got an issued patent. That was just the start. It was, it didn't really mean anything yet, right? So we did business plan competitions. We did innovation plan competitions. We got some recognition and funding from the Clinton Global Initiative University. We got to be in VentureWell's entrepreneurial training. So we had some really good resources at the university, bootstrapping, but little by little, hadn't started the company yet. But then right upon close to graduating, had from the university, had a really good relationship with the U.S. Navy and an organization that became our close manufacturer. And we got a contract with the Navy. We were able to pilot the technology, bring on the manufacturer as a subcontractor, proved out the pilot, led us to another pilot. But at that time, I had left the university, had started the company. And at that moment, it's like, well, what do I do now? We hit milestones, but how do I get more funding? What do I need the funding for? And that's when I think was one of my biggest kind of challenges of what's that next step, right? And I had left the university, had really good advisors and support there, but now was, I'm running the company. What do we need to do? How do we keep the lights on? I had finished the Unreasonable Institute incubator, and through that had some really good connections to female investors. I didn't necessarily think that I was going to go that way, but because of that, those connections started to develop relationships, and then ended up raising a seed round from a group of female investors, as well as some of our advisors and support system that we received through the university. But it took a while. It took probably about 2 years after, maybe a year and a half after leaving the Unreasonable Institute. But I think it was that part where I'm really trying to run a business. I can't necessarily keep winning competitions. Those help. But how do I really move to scale? And what is, to Kedma's point and Carolyn's point, like having the financials there, understanding what are those milestones. So I think for entrepreneurs, innovators out there, being able to phase it out, try to get those competitions, prizes, grant opportunities, the non-dilutive funding. But if you're starting to feel some pressure, kind of like I did, okay, we really want to scale this, and we were hardware. So we needed to manufacture, we needed to build. We said, okay, we need to take on equity investors, but we wanted to make sure it was the right link, and quickly realized customer relations, customer discovery is really different than investor discovery, investor relations. So to Carolyn's point, it takes, I all of a sudden became full-time fundraising as the CEO, and tried to do, we're a real small team, but just being aware of that. And maybe one thing I'll leave this part of the discussion with, when I did some of my first initial pitches, in the due diligence, one of the potential investors asked me, do I enjoy being in the lab and innovating more, or do I enjoy being out talking with partners, talking with customers? At that moment, I knew what the answer, I knew what I should say. I should say the latter, that I be partners, customers. And I really was drawn towards that way. But it was in that moment that I realized, oh, this is real. I enjoyed being in the lab and innovating, but I was shifting in my entrepreneurial journey towards being an early stage founder.
So Carolyn, same question to you. Tell us about some of the funding challenges you may have had when you started your company.
Where to begin? So much of what you all said really resonates. I mean, I think that one of the biggest challenges for us was being able to communicate to investors what we were doing while we were still trying to figure it out ourselves. I mean, I go back and I look at our early stage pitch decks, which I do periodically, and what I find is the overall mission hasn't changed a bit. We've always been about democratizing access to resources for every entrepreneur, regardless of where they come from or who they know. And what has changed dramatically is the business model with which, behind which we do that. So we've learned a ton. We've gotten much smarter. I mean, I look back to investors who told us no in our seed round, and I totally understand why. I'm like, there was a lot we hadn't figured out, and we weren't, as far along as we thought we were at the time. But I'm also grateful we didn't get as much money as we wanted, because we would have given up a lot more equity at a time when we probably wouldn't have deployed it in the best of ways. So there is, ultimately, I think entrepreneurship is sort of this race against the clock. It's how far can you get with the money that you have at any moment in time. And you've got to get as much traction as you can to set yourself up for the next phase. But it means you're always sprinting. And I think that's why the startup journey is so exhausting, is that you can't stop for a minute. Like every week you're spending money, you're paying, you're doling out paychecks and paying for rent and doing all of these things. Every week is expensive to operate your business, and only gets more and more expensive as you grow. And you've got to make sure you're bringing in enough money to sort of, grow that trajectory. So I think our biggest obstacles in the early days were focusing on the right investors. We talked to everyone, and I think what changed between our seed round and our Series A was, by the time we got to our Series A, we knew who was not going to be interested, and we didn't spend our time there. We never had traction with the traditional sort of Sandhill Road, VCs. We always had a lot of traction with strategic corporate VCs who understood what we were doing and saw the need internally. We always had a lot of traction with impact investors. We always had a lot of traction with, on the fintech side, more and more as we've evolved, have started seeing a lot more traction there. But I would say the, kind of enterprise SaaS side, they just never got what we were and never understood it and never really cared to dig in on it. So once we found our lane, it helped us save a lot of time. The other thing that we did is, in the early days, both my co-founder and I were heavily involved. At one point, we realized one of us has to operate, because the trick of why you're fundraising is that you also have to be showing improving traction. As Trisha mentioned, the fundraising process takes a long time. So if your first conversation with somebody is in June and you're not closing that deal till August, you have to show traction from June to August while you're almost full-time spending your time out fundraising. And so you better have a team behind you that can be maintaining the business, growing those metrics, and showing that from June to July to August, you hit what you put on that financial model and what you said you were going to go after, because that's your biggest proof point. And then the other big learning I would say is taking a no. And while we always respected those no's, we always maintained the relationship. And so we just put people on a list, and even though they told us no, we'd continue sharing traction with them. Here's where we've evolved. Here's what we did. Here's how we've grown. Here's what we learned. Thanks for the feedback that you gave us. Here's how we applied it. And we had several no's that actually turned into yeses in later stages. And so I think those relationships are really important in understanding why people are giving you certain feedback. And if you're hearing it enough, there's probably some traction. But at the same time, recognizing that venture capitalists or any type of investor, really, they don't know your business as well as you do. So they're going to give you advice sometimes that may or may not apply. It's your job to take it, process it, and determine if it's applicable or not.
Sounded like you took advantage of hashtag karma currency.
We are very relationship driven. We are, incredibly, and in work, we've partnered with investors and how can we help you? How can we support what you're doing? How can we, if you have a pipeline of companies that you're interested in, we support, hundreds of thousands of business owners. Let us know who you're looking for and we'll send them your way, even if we're a no. And I think those relationships have paid off in spades for us, sometimes very indirectly, but you never know how. We had an investor tell us no that ended up sponsoring an event that we hosted. And so they didn't give us any equity, didn't give us any investment funding. But we did make, $50,000.
This is a good time to replug the United States Patent and Trademark Office pro bono program. It was a big session yesterday. And we encourage people to go to the uspto.gov website and learn more about that wonderful program that can help assist people who need the technical assistance to get their patent or trademark off the ground, especially if they have financial challenges. We are, believe it or not, in the final stretch, the last 11 minutes. But I want to give Kitma a chance to respond to that question if she wanted to add a little bit more about the biggest reasons people are not successful in securing funding and, how that was applicable to her own serial entrepreneurial pursuits.
I'm going to piggyback on what Carolyn said. You're going to get a lot of no's, and you need to target even down to that relationship. I always say that there's a curse to being a visionary because you see things before anyone else sees it. I think about the experience of SBIR. It's one of, I received the SBA Champion of the Year award for it, and I'll tell you why. Most people don't know this, but when I decided I was going to raise funds for the SBIR program to bring it to Oregon, I called every single agency and this is what they said. Sounds great. If you get it going, I'll give you a booth. Click. Sounds great. If you get it going, I'll give you a booth. Click. It was on my birthday, July 27th, 1 year before, about 9 months before. And I was dealing with Mr. Edsel Brown, if you know Mr. Edsel Brown. And what I did was I called him back and I said, Edsel, thank you for the opportunity to host the SBIR conference in Oregon. I should have said no, but I said, we're going to take it on. And we was me. And without telling my husband, I went and took a $50,000 line against our home. Now, why would I do something so crazy? Because if I'm on the sideline, I'm part of the problem. So I said, this has to happen. And then once I made that commitment, I put a team together. And in 2012, we brought the entire SBIR conference and changed the trajectory of SBIR in Oregon. You go there today and you look at SBIR 0, you look at State of Oregon, all that came from that moment. So sometimes in life, we have to do things that are absolutely insanity because nobody's going to believe your idea more than you do. So when Carolyn said, people said no, she could have just given up. She could have walked away. She could have believed them. But something inside of her said, thank you very much. Appreciate what you're saying. And I'm going to keep knocking on the door. So why people may not be successful? They stop too early. They listen to the wrong people.
So we're rounding this out. You, Kitma, Carolyn, and Tricia, give us the last 1 minute for each of you, your sage advice for the audience. And thank you all for participating.
I'll kick it off. I would say stay focused. Typically, I think as entrepreneurs, we're solving really big and complex problems. And the more you dig in, the more complex they get. Focus and chip away consistently as you're get everybody sort of not just, moving in the same direction, but really rowing in sync on your team. And if you're doing that, that's, I think, the greatest job you can do as a founder. Focus. Do something, do it well, get validation that it worked, and then move on to the next instead of trying to do 10 things at once.
Tricia.
Yeah, I have to double down on it's all about the relationships. Kedma and Carolyn's made the point, but even again, going back to student innovators, early entrepreneurs, like if you get those connections, you get an advisor, maybe you win a competition, follow up and follow through. Let those organizations know what you're doing. And that can be hard in the day-to-day to keep track of that. And I learned that through one of my advisors was the importance of that. So keep the relationships. You never know what's going to happen. To Carolyn's point, you get a no, but it might come back in another way. So we all want to work with really good people. So continue to do that. And I've learned through my journey, it is, relationships.
All right, Kidma, bring us home.
Okay.
Tax, currency.
Very simple. There's a saying, you are the 5 people you surround yourself with. Cross it out. You are the 5 communities you surround yourself with. I'm part of Pipeline Angels, TBD Angels, the SBA community. Choose your 5 communities, and that's going to change where you are today.
And I'll leave on something my boss, Chairman Bryant, says. If you hang around with non-broke people, you'll be the 10th.
So true.
So pick your 5 communities wisely. Make sure they have some assets. It's been great. Thank you, Deepak. Thank you, ladies. The hour went quickly, and we really enjoyed being a part of it. Thank you.